Hey, welcome back. I'm Tim Ellis, and today I wanted to talk about how to actually go from the quick sketch I showed you the other day to a sketch that actually looks like your subject. So I showed you how to grid out a large piece of paper, how to double size a photograph. If you missed these videos, you can watch below or click to my main page to find those. And I'll link to those below is what I meant to say. And I've got this picture that I've gone ahead and gridded out. And what I wanted to show you how to do today is to actually use some of these scaling calipers. So you don't need these. You can just measure with a ruler. You can measure with a pencil. I teach those methods in my beginning drawing lessons if you want to watch that, but these are pretty helpful. You can buy these on Amazon. I will try to put a link to them below as well. Sometimes they're a little finicky, and if they're not set up just exactly correctly, they don't work, but there's a lot of holes, so you can double, triple, quadruple, whatever you'd like to do with a drawing. And you can also use them for sculpting. So right now they're set for double. So for instance, if I was drawing my nose or sculpting my nose, this is the actual size of my nose. The opposite side is going to double them, and it's going to make something twice as big. This is so helpful when you're doubling and drawing, and I'm going to show you how we can use these. So let's click over to my down-facing camera, and we will take a look. And I'm actually going to turn me off for that part. No, I'm going to turn me off there. All right, so let's look at what we've got here. So we've got our gridded piece of paper, and you can see, if you were not here for the last lesson, I drew a diagonal through the corners of the mouth, through the corners of the eye, a halfway point here and a halfway point here. The way I got these halfway points is by taking a piece of paper that's the same size, folding it in half both ways, and getting quarter-size pieces, and then transferring those measurements to my paper by overlapping and continuing those lines, top, bottom, top, side, side, connecting those, and now I have a grid. So the great thing about this grid, if you missed my drawing lesson before, is that you can then notice that this print is scaled double left and right and double top and bottom, creating something eventually 4 times the size of your original. And you can see how I used this print to make this drawing, which is what I'm going to show you how to do today. So believe it or not, we can go from a print to a grid to a very simplified quick sketch, and take that sketch to something that actually looks like this. And that's what I wanted to show you how to do today. So let's click around and show you how to do this and how to use these scaling calipers. And that's what I'm going to be doing in this lesson. So I know this drawing is pretty difficult to see from the screen that I'm looking at. I know it's a little hard to make it out, but this should be a very light sketch. I've actually gone ahead and made this much darker than I normally would, but I'm trying to make it so you can see what I've got here. Now, this is a very simplified sketch, an oval for the head, very simplified nose, eyes, and mouth. So what I don't want you to think is that I'm showing you how to, by the way, I have to keep this in focus, how to draw an eye without looking at an eye. What I teach is observational drawing. So we will be very carefully looking at these eyes as we draw them, at the nose and everything else. But what we've got now is what I call a quick sketch. Now, if you have a lot of experience with drawing, once you've got your quick sketch in place, well, let me backtrack. Your quick sketch might have a lot more detail than this. I recommend to beginners start with very simplified shapes, then measure and fix your simplified shapes without adding details, and then go back through and add your detail lines, including highlight shapes and shadow shapes. So what I mean by that is a shape, if you squint at this printout, notice we get a very hard line here on the neck. We get a strange shape here that I would refer to as a shadow shape. A highlight shape would be something that is a light shape, like this chunk of hair right here. Or if we look really closely, the shapes that the highlights in the eyes and the highlight on the nose, the highlights in the ears. Anything that creates a shape is a highlight or a shadow shape, and that's what I'll be referring to as I look at this. Now, when we're measuring, always measure from a grid line. Never measure from something you've already drawn. Now, when you get really far along, you might want to say, hey, is my distance between the eyes correct? But that is not a good place to start. When you're starting, you want to be measuring on your gridded paper to your gridded paper from a vertical line to a vertical line, horizontal line to a horizontal line. And here's why. Once you draw something, it may or may not be in the correct spot. So if you measure from this eye, assuming it's right, to get the corner of this eye, well, now you've transferred your error in your measurement. So here's how this works. Now, by the way, these scaling calipers I have set on the 6th hole, and this particular brand will double it if you're setting these up right. Now, believe it or not, when I first set these up, they were not doubling. And that can be incredibly frustrating. And so I took them apart and put them back together a few times, and now they are. So just as an example, I'm going to measure 2 inches here, and I'm measuring from the 21 to the 23. So when I double them, it should give me, and if you don't have it perfect, this won't work. So I'm going to make sure I have this absolutely perfect. Okay, that's exactly 2 inches. And then this is exactly 4 inches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So whatever I measure here is going to be doubled at the opposite side. It's a good idea before you start to just check and make sure they're working, because it can be really frustrating if this doesn't work. So each one of these blocks, if I measure it really carefully, should be exactly doubled down here. So let me just make sure I'm spot on. It's a little bigger. So when I measure the small block, it's basically doubled right here. And it is just the littlest bit off. I'm a little unhappy. Sometimes there's some inconsistency in the manufacturing of these, and this is slightly off, but it'll get us where we want to go. So now that I've got my simplified sketch in, I want to look for things that definitely seem out of proportion, but I'm going to recommend that you measure every line where it crosses one of our grid lines or diagonal lines. This will help so much. And believe it or not, this quick sketch took 3 to 5 minutes, and fixing it should take less than 10. So I'm going to recommend that we start without adding details. So I might make my lines a little more refined, but I'm not going to worry about making it look just like my drawing. So I'm going to measure right along the edge here to his cheek. I measure from the photo with the small side, and then move to my large side on my actual drawing. So I'm going to make a mark right here. This tells me that this cheek line was incorrect. So now now that I've got where that cheek line should be, I'm actually going to redraw it. So I'm just going to curve this out just a little bit. And as I look at this, it does curve a little bit before it hits the nose. And now I'm going to erase it because it was wrong. So when I say fix things line by line, shape by shape, that's what I mean. So I've drawn a simplified nose here. So here's my simplified nose, right? Well, here's the actual nose. Now I'm going to measure from my center line to the bottom of that nose with my small side. So when I double it, from the middle to the bottom of the nose should be right here. Since this line is horizontal, I will make a horizontal line so I know where it goes. So this nose comes a little bit lower than I initially drew it. So I'm just going to redraw that a little lower. How far out does it come? Well, the part that sticks out the absolute most is right here. So I'm going to check that. And that nose, now check this out. This is a lot different than I had. From the edge, this nose should come out this much, which means doubling it, that nose should come all the way to here. So as I redraw this nose, I'm going to make it much bigger. Now I have not erased my lines. I'm not erasing and then redrawing. I'm redrawing around my old lines. So this tells me that the top of this eye is probably wrong as well. So now I'm going to measure it. So let's go along my eye line. I made this line go through the corners of the eyes. This is where the bridge of the nose touches this horizontal line, well, diagonal line. You know what? I just bumped those. Let's just double check because we don't want to make an error. And those did move on me. If you hold them from the center here, they're less likely to move. So here's my line going from here to here. And you can see that I had this line in the wrong spot. Now you might think, well, just measure it from the first place. But as you become better at drawing, you're not going to need to make huge revisions. But I just want you to see from my very, very quick loose sketch, even if it's not very good, once I've redrawn this in the simplified form that I already had it, it's already starting to look a little bit more like Tom Holland. All right, now I'm going to go from the center line to the back of this nose. And I'm walking you through this, and we're actually making progress pretty quickly. The back of the nose is correct, hooray. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that with a little more confidence. Now, a lot of beginners, as they get their lines correct, will make them crazy dark. Don't do that. We still do not have detailed lines. And I'll show you what I mean by detailed lines in the next lesson, but we're not worried about that right now. Now, I had measured this before, right? And I know that that cheek is going to come out just a little bit more, so I'm going to change that too. All right, what about the mouth? We have not measured the mouth. So let's go from this center line to the corner of the mouth, from the center line to the corner of the mouth. So the corner of the mouth, believe it or not, starts here. If it looks really different than what you expected, measure it again. Now, I do think I measured that a little bit off. Yeah, I did. Because you're doubling everything, a little error makes a huge difference. So I was just fixing that line. This is where the corner of the mouth should be. Now, before I draw the other one, the other side, and redraw that simplified mouth, I'm going to measure both sides. You can see I dropped my calipers. Here we go. We'll just do it again. All right, so the corner of that mouth should be here. Now, I didn't even have the side of the face there. So let's just redraw the side of the face a little bit so we've got somewhere to put this mouth. As I do that, because I know that was so off, I can tell that this chin's going to have to come down too. That's okay. Let's just give myself something to work within. And this was the side of the mouth, right? And that's about where the side of the face and the side of the mouth are kind of coming together there. So I drew a very simplified version here. The upper lip barely makes an appearance in this window. I'm going to get just a hair more accurate here. I really don't see the top lip above this line very much, but it does come to that corner. And then for the lower lip, it comes below the line very much, continues, and then curves up to about there. So now that I've redrawn it, I can erase all these wrong lines. And let me just show you what we're getting. We're starting to get some features where they should be. Now this chin is going to make a big difference because he has a pretty pointy chin. So I'm going to go from the middle of his mouth to the bottom of his chin. So I'm measuring to the lowest point, kind of towards the front of this chin from the center line. Now I would actually recommend going from the closest edge. And since that diagonal line has a chance of being wrong, let's go from the bottom of the page. So from the bottom of the page to the bottom of the chin is here. Since this is a horizontal line, I'm drawing a horizontal line to give myself some guidance. And I'm not exactly sure how far out it goes, but I know it's going to come down about this far. So let's just erase some of these other lines in between so we can kind of see what we're doing. And we're bringing that chin way down. Now, how far out does it go? Well, you can't really measure to a curve, right? But since his shoulder is touching his chin right here, and his shoulder is kind of touching at the part of the chin that comes out the most, I can use that shoulder as a guide. So let's do this. So here's the shoulder. It goes from the edge of the paper to where the shoulder touches the chin is right there. So from the paper to where the shoulder touches the chin is there. Now, here we don't know that that shoulder is correct. So let's just double check it. Let's just see. So it doesn't actually take very long to fix these things. So that shoulder should be up higher. It should be right here. So I can take, this is the shoulder height. This is where the shoulder touches the chin. So bullseye, right in between those is where that chin should be. So now I'm going to look at that. That chin should come through here. The bottom of the mouth should come through there. And I did say I was not going to make these lines much more accurate than I started with, but I ended up doing that anyway. This is where the shoulder should start. So I'm just going to redraw that a little bit. Now you could just draw it as you already had it, or you can go, okay, it goes down a little bit, it goes up a little bit, and you can make it a little bit more refined if you like to. If that's overwhelming, just stick with the simplified version. That's really all you need right now. But notice we're starting to get something that's a little bit more proportional. We've measured the mouth, we've measured the nose, but we have not measured the eyes yet or the edge of this face. So let's do that next. By the way, if you get lost and you get overwhelmed with something, just move to a different part of the drawing and it won't be so overwhelming. Okay, so the side of his face along this diagonal comes to here. So now I can measure it. I know that's curving in to get to that part and his chin's curving out. I'm sorry, his cheek is curving out. So I just redrew his cheek. And you know what? I had forgotten. I'd already measured that cheek, so that was correct. So I'm actually going to fix that. So I'm going right on that line. It comes in a little bit there. it seems more curvy than it is. And that's the case with a lot of things. A lot of times you'll think it's one shape and it'll be another. Now this brow really comes out super far. So I'm just going to measure to where that is because that's bothering me. So that's not something that we need to measure at this point, but I really want to get that brow correct because it's really quintessential to the essence of this guy's face. All right, so let's go from the edge. Now I'm not going to measure from the bridge of his nose, even though I've already drawn it. I'm going to measure from the edge of the paper to where I see that eyeball start, which is right there. So here's the edge of the paper, eyeball starts here, and you can see we see a little bit of that rounded edge. So I'm just going to draw that in. It goes a little bit above the line. I don't really have a good corner here, right? If you watched my prior drawing lesson, we talked about measuring from corner to corner. We don't see a corner on this eye. We see this curved edge. So I used this as the corner. Okay, so let's get this inside line. So here is the inside corner of the eye. It should be right at the nose point and a little bit below it. So this short distance is actually going to be doubled. So I'm going to measure from my center line to the exact height of that corner. And it would be right here because I just measured from it. So there's that inside corner. So now I can actually draw that in if I want. It arches up above the line. Now there's so much information in this eye. We're not going to get everything right now, but I am going to get a little bit of that curve so it's kind of in the right spot. Let's get the other eye and make sure it's in the right spot. So notice the corner almost touches this center of this grid. So I know that's about right, but where's the inside corner? So if I go from the center line to that inside corner, it's going to be somewhere along this line. Well, how high up? I'm going to measure up from here. I go to this line I just made, and it's right here. It's right along my eye line. So I could just redraw this line that I've already made, just like this, right? I could just redraw it. Or if you're feeling a little more confident, you could actually draw in a little bit of that shape. I'm going to talk more about this in my next lesson as we actually put in the exact shapes that we're seeing. But start with simplified shapes. Now I can get rid of those guidelines, and I've now got eyes in the right spot, nose, mouth, chin. I do not have the forehead, the hairline, the ear, the back of the neck, or anything else. So let's just do that. So if you notice, we're not too far into this lesson yet, and we're rolling along. So here we go. So we're going a little slower than I would normally draw because this is a lesson, right? So here we go. Here's the bottom edge. So from the bottom edge to that chin is right there. So I'm going to double that. So here we go. Hey, I had something right. Great. Now I know this chin is right. So now I can kind of connect these. And I have so many guidelines in here. Let's just erase those because it's getting crazy. So let's find out where some of these things are. So how high up would this line be on the back of his ear? Well, the closest line to measure to that's a grid line is the center line. So let's go to there. And it's going to be pretty much where I had it. It's somewhere along this line is where that ear is. I had it a little bit off. So how can I locate it left to right, right? Because I've got the height. Well, I can go from my grid to where that ear would start, because the ear and the jaw start at the same spot. So here's my center line. Here's my ear line. So it's going to start right there. So that tells us a lot. That tells us that's where the ear starts, and it also tells us that's where this jaw starts. So now I can look at that jaw shape. I know this is right already, and I can start to kind of put that in. So now I've got somewhat of a jawline. I can erase those wrong guidelines. So if you're watching what I'm doing, we measure, we correct the line, we redraw it, then we erase it. If you erase it beforehand, you're going to end up with nothing as a guide. And the more you do this, the better you're going to get at drawing in the first place, and you're not going to have to measure so much. So when I'm doing a large painting, I'm not measuring each thing. What I'm doing is freehanding it, looking back and forth, stepping back, seeing how things look. And when something looks weird and I just can't get it right, that's when I measure. So I got the back of his neck right here, but I have no idea if any of this part is right. Sorry, I'm throwing these calipers around. So corners are great things to measure too. Here's a corner I can measure to this one, right? That's where his shirt intersects with his neck. And that's going to tell us where this point is. So I can measure up to it from the bottom. So here's where I have it now. So the height is pretty correct. It's a little bit off. It's right there. And how far in is it? Well, it's this far in from the edge, which means it's right there. Almost had it right. It should be right here. That's where this line should be. So that's where the shirt should intersect. So I'm going to redraw that, then erase it. And that means the neck is going to come right through there. And that neck is pretty straight after it curves in through this point. Goes in a little bit, curves up. And we've already measured where the ear starts here. So I have to connect these two lines and make it work. That looks a little funky to me, so we might have to recheck that later on down the line. But we're not worried about perfection right now. We're just measuring points. So notice we're starting to get this looking like something. Before it looked very, very unlike him. The face was short. And so even though my quick sketch was pretty much of a disaster, you're noticing it's really starting to take some shape. I'm just going to get the shirt collar in here a little bit. The shirt makes an appearance right there, right to left. So I can put that in. And notice how powerful this is. Like, we are not worried about getting things detailed yet. So my lines aren't following the exact form of the lines in the photograph. I'm just getting these simplified shapes in with a little bit more form than we started with. And it's starting to look pretty good. Let's worry about this ear. So we've got the bottom of the ear, but I don't have the top of the ear. Remember, corners are good things to measure to. So here's a corner where this ear is intersecting with the hair. And I can also measure along this line to see where the ear crosses that line. So I'm going to start with that one. Oh my gosh, I got something right. Okay, that's the back of the ear. It's almost right. And then you can see right below that, it starts to cut in. Now I know that this part of the ear was correct. It was actually supposed to be right here. So I'm just going to kind of get that shape close. Because right now I have so many lines here, I'm not sure which one is supposed to be what. All right, so there's my simplified ear. Let's see if what we've got correct. Here's the height. The highest point of the ear is right there. Okay, it's way too high. So it only comes to right there, gets cut off by the hair. And then how far in, let's see, what can I measure to? Let's find this point right here. It comes in that much. And that's where the ear, wait, I got lost. We're measuring to this, correct? If you get lost, it's no big deal. Just go back and recheck it. Yeah, I was trying to measure to right this point where the ear intersects with the hair, I believe. And that should be right here. So I'm pretty happy with that. So the hair and the ear kind of form right there. I'm not worried about all these detailed shapes yet, but I would like to get this hair. Let's get the height of this hair. Now, I don't want to measure it off the ear, as tempting as that is, because if it's wrong, I'll double my mistake. So I'm going to measure from my center line to where the hair starts. Hair starts here. So it cuts up, it curves out. It doesn't come out much farther than the ear. Now, I am not doing what I said, and I am adding a little bit more shape because it's fun. Once you start to get those things in, that's exciting. You know, if you follow too many rules when you're drawing, it's boring. So anyway, you got to keep it fun. So let's get the forehead and the general hair shape in, and then we can go from our crazy measured quick sketch to something that actually starts to look like him. So remember, we measured the corners. Intersection between the forehead and the hair here is a corner. So I can measure in to how far that happens. So it's going to happen this far in. Now, we don't know if it's here. We don't know if it's there. So I'm just going to make a straight line. By the way, these can double as a ruler if you need a straight line. So somewhere along that line is where the forehead and the hair separate. How can I find where it is? Well, I can measure to the closest edge, and the closest edge for the height is the top. So I'm going to go from the top to that line. Now, if I go right back to the line where I just was, I'm going to make a cross. That is this point. That's really great. So I've already got this point. So now if this intersection is where the hair starts, then the head's got to pop out a little bit here and then kind of come down. It's going to do something like that. Now we can erase this because this was all wrong, right? We've got our intersection here. We can just turn that into a dot and get rid of all that junk. And then we can draw in that a little bit of that hair shape. Make it look a little bit more like what it looks like, not too much. All right, this can all go. This was nothing. This was the simplified head shape. By the way, if you have a bigger eraser, this will go faster. I'm just starting with a basic school grade HB pencil, which is great for basic drawing. You could do almost an entire representational drawing this way. Now, eventually, I'm going to do this in charcoal, but I like starting with pencil because charcoal becomes big and messy really fast. Now, I know it's hard to see, but you can see the back of his head here. So I'm going to do a little trick and measure from the corner to the top of the arch of the head here. For arches, remember I said it's hard to measure an arch? Well, here's a trick. Since the back of the head is pretty much the central arch, I can diagonally measure to where the crown of his head is. So that's what I'm going to do. This is not 100% accurate all the time, but that's where the crown of the head should be. So that means this is way off, and then the head actually touches the top of the paper here. So I already lost that corner. Was it this? Oh, it's this. Okay. So we're going to start here. We're going to arch this around. It almost touches the edge, then it kind of curves in. So this was out way too far. Now what is exciting is as you start to get even this simplified sketch a little bit closer, look how far we've come in, let's see, how long has this been running? We've been doing this for 27 minutes, so much longer than we would do this in real life. This should take between 10 to 12 minutes, maybe a little longer if you're a beginner, or a little longer if you get frustrated. And you know what? I'm pretty sure we did not measure this or this sideburn. So just so we've measured everything, let's do that. So we've already got this intersection. I didn't get this point. So remember, points are great things to measure to. We can't really measure along a curve, although I just did. From my center line to this crease is right here. So hey, that's actually exact. Now I don't know how high up it should be though, so let's measure that. Always measure from your closest gridded line. My closest gridded line could be here. It's about the same as the top. It's a little closer to here. So if I go from here straight in, that's in the right spot. That almost never happens for me. So it curves down, arches up here. We can erase this now. So that corner is correct. Now we can follow where the hair intersects with this vertical line too. So let's do it. So what happens when you're drawing is you're going to get overwhelmed and you're going to think, oh, I got all this stuff and everything looks wrong. Just take one line at a time. You know, there's that old adage, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time, because you can't eat an elephant. It's an insane task, and I wouldn't eat a cute little elephant anyway. But if you were to take on a huge task, you do it one thing at a time. Don't get overwhelmed. Oh, this is all crooked for you. Sorry, let me straighten that out. I'm not looking at my screen as I'm working, so sorry if things got a little wacky. So let's go from our center line to the bottom of the sideburn. Okay, the sideburn height is good. I know the corner of the sideburn is not right though. Let's get that. So from the center line to the corner of the sideburn, holy mackerel, is that possible? Okay, if it doesn't look right, measure it a second time. So this was right. The sideburn actually begins here. So there's no sideburn there. And that means it should arch in a little bit more and probably arch up. I don't think we measured this one yet. Let's see. So what do you guys think? Looking a little better, right? Yeah, we did not measure that. So let's do that now. Measure from the photo with your short side Now, you do not need calipers. There are different ways to measure, and some people really don't like measuring super accurately when they're drawing. I personally feel like it kind of takes a little bit of the fun out of it. So when I'm drawing, I won't do this very often. I will do this when I have a problem. But when you're starting, you need a way to check and see how you're doing. So this is a great way to do that. The height of this art should be here, so it does come up more. And then the hair comes over like this, because we know this is in the right spot. I think that angle is a little off, but I know the height is right here. It's a little more curved. So now I can get rid of this. There's going to be a lot more lines in that ear, but we have now got our measured quick sketch for our big charcoal drawing. And believe it or not, you saw how terrible it looked. So no matter how terrible your quick sketch is, you can get here just by measuring, and then we can start adding the complex shapes, the shadow shapes, the highlight shapes, and then actually go in and shade it. So you can do this. I know this seems difficult, but it's not if you take it one step at a time. All right, so we just did this drawing together. We did our quick sketch. You can do this with any photo you want. In my beginning drawing class, I do talk about, how do you pick a good photo? How do you take a good photo? It's more exciting when you're taking a photo of someone that you really want to draw. You get a great photo with some good shadows on their face, and then you start to draw it. So exciting. And if you know me, I actually get more excited when I'm painting it. So for me, it's all about the color. But you really don't want to move into painting until you've got that representational drawing going on. By the way, if you want to learn representational drawing, I teach that. And I have a full asynchronous online class that you can be a part of. And I even have a free lesson if you broken into 2 parts. So it's really 2 lessons if you sign up for my mailing list on my website. And I'll put that link below too. So if you'd like to check that out and see if it's something you want to do with me, take a look. And the before and afters of my students are insane. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so have a lot of experience with it. So if you're thinking this won't work for me, it will. As a matter of fact, the more you learn about what I believe, I'm not a firm believer in talent. I am a believer in hard work and learning and trying. And I think that success in art, at accomplishing your goals in art, is like 99% your desire to do it and your willingness to not give up. So if you can do that with me, I can teach you. All right, Tim Ellis, check out my next drawing coming up. Please subscribe and like if you liked it, and I'd love it if you'd share it too. All right, bye-bye, good night.